Welcome, everybody. You can't see me right now, but my name's Sarah Kendrick, and I'm the Clinical Director at Mental Health Innovations, Shout. I have Amelia and Chris with me on the call, two of our amazing Shout volunteers, and I'm going to explain how they'll be part of the discussion later. Just to let everyone know that the session is being recorded, and the link will be available afterwards. Please do turn off your camera if you want to avoid coming on screen. So just to let you know what you might expect from this webinar. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Shout, our organisation first, and a bit about what we do. And then I'm going to talk you through how you might respond to somebody who's having suicidal thoughts, or how you might best think about responding to them. We're going to have a look at what the signs might be that somebody's struggling with suicidal thoughts, what language you can use, and what are the best options for support. Now, the theme this year of World Suicide Prevention Day is changing the narrative around suicide. We've been doing that at Shout for the last 5 years. We've been opening up dialogue about suicide, and we're a service that works with people on any mental health issue or problem they might have. But most people contact us about suicide. We believe strongly that talking about suicide is something we can all do. Our service is powered by volunteers who take conversations with people every day. And today we're aiming to help you feel confident in doing exactly the same. So let's just think about what changing the narrative on suicide means. It's about transforming how we perceive what is a really complex social issue. I'm sure that all of us will have been touched by suicide at some point via people that we know or perhaps family members. Changing the narrative is also about shifting from a culture of silence and a lack of understanding to more openness, empathy, and support. What World Suicide Prevention Day this year we're aiming to do is to inspire individuals, communities, organisations and governments to engage in open and honest discussions about suicide and suicidal behaviour. By initiating these vital conversations, we can break down barriers, we can raise awareness, and we can create better cultures of understanding and support. So a little bit about what we do at Shout. Shout is the UK's only 24/7 tech support service that's free and available for anyone. The service, because it's 24/7, is there when other services are closed. And it's by text, so it's confidential, and also it's silent, so it's accessible on the move from anywhere in the UK, so anywhere that people are. Our 2.5 thousand volunteers have taken over 2.5 million conversations so far. People text our service for absolutely anything and everything that's happening. You can imagine that's happening in somebody's life that is troubling them or is distressing them. As I said, most people will text us because they're experiencing thoughts about suicide or have ideas about suicide. But they also talk to us about anxiety, relationships. We have a lot of young people talking to us about school or college. People talk to us about work. So as I said, absolutely anything that people are experiencing in their lives, they text us about. When somebody texts us, we always engage with them warmly and always with compassion. Our team is trained to explore what the person is bringing, to explore their issue, and to risk assess as well, so to ensure that person is safe. And we have trained clinicians there at all times to ensure that our conversations are safe. So we aim to help texters explore their feelings and support them to start navigating their way through them. Where there are suicidal thoughts, we will help the texter to reach a place where they're safe and they have a plan to ensure that their safety now and in the future is there, and that they can look after themselves. Shout are the experts in suicide prevention because we've had, as I said, 2.5 million conversations, and we learn from these about the prevalence of mental health issues across the UK in real time. We learn what works best for people in crisis or those who need urgently to talk to somebody. And we have a wide reach to people who may feel marginalised or find it hard to access services or can't access services during normal working hours. Just a note about your own well-being during this webinar. Suicide is a challenging thing to talk about and to think about and to discuss, and it's important that you know in this webinar you can drop out if you need to, but importantly notice how you're feeling throughout the next hour. Know that Shout is here for you, so anybody can text Shout to 85258, but also think about the people around you who you can connect with and you can talk to about the content of this webinar. Okay, so please do bear that in mind. Now I'm going to move on to how to talk to somebody who's struggling with suicidal thoughts. Now, we strongly believe that anybody can do this, or rather everybody can do this. Again, it can feel quite daunting, quite frightening to think that you might approach a conversation with somebody about suicide. But if we think about changing the narrative on suicide and the idea of openness and empathy and genuineness and the intention to help, this is part of it. Now, it's really important to address what some people believe is the case, that talking about suicide doesn't make it happen. All of the evidence and all of the research shows that actually opening up a discussion about suicide and using the word suicide or using the word take your own life, all of these things show that you're keen to listen to the person who is experiencing these thoughts. You're giving the person who you're talking to permission to use their own language, or sometimes just to discover their own language about how they're feeling and to express what's on their mind. So really important that most people that you talk to, if you're talking to them about suicide, are not going to be shocked. They're going to be grateful that, you know, that you've thought enough about them to have the conversation with them. So let's have a think about what the cues are, what the signs might be of somebody who is having suicidal thoughts or feeling suicidal. There may be verbal and non-verbal cues. So, for example, a person may be at high risk, perhaps, of attempting suicide if they're threatening actively to hurt themselves or to take their own life, if they're writing or talking about death, dying, or suicide, in which case you have a very open means of stepping into that conversation. It can sometimes be the case that people are actively looking at ways of taking their own life, like stockpiling tablets. But there are also some much more subtle signs that someone might not be okay. And it's equally valid for you to ask them if they're thinking about suicide. If They are perhaps talking about harming themselves in some way or feeling hopeless. So people who have, no hope for the future and feelings of helplessness, of hopelessness and being trapped, or a belief that things will never get better or change. These are signs that somebody may be experiencing thoughts about taking their life. Sometimes we see people talking about getting their affairs in order, but they may also have really strong feelings of self-loathing or self-hatred. Another striking characterization that we sometimes see of people who are having suicidal thoughts is that they feel they're a burden on people. So they tend to withdraw from other people, or they want to be left alone, or they say they want to be left alone. And that's that burdensomeness, that sense that nobody else can help them to shoulder this problem, is exactly the problem that we want to step into. Another non-verbal sign that you might notice is a sudden sense of calm, or indeed any kind of change of behavior. So a sense of calm and happiness after being, perhaps very depressed. Perhaps it means that that person has made some kind of decision about taking their life. So these are some, they're not all. You know the people around you, and if you're talking to a stranger, you can ask what their thinking is. And please do bear in mind, you might not always be able to spot these signs. They may not be there to spot. And the kind of emotions that I'm talking about show up very differently in everyone. If someone you know is showing high-risk warning signs, then please do visit our urgent mental health support webpage on the Shout website. And bear in mind, it can feel really overwhelming to hear about someone wishing to end their life. But stick with it and draw on your courage and the idea that we're changing the narrative. Here are some steps that you can take alongside your friend or loved one. So reach out and start a conversation. One of the biggest things we find with people who are struggling with suicidal thoughts is that they can feel disconnected from the people around them and are struggling sometimes with feelings of isolation. Now, as I said, often this is because of the stigma around suicide, or because they're afraid of the reaction they will receive. They're afraid of the power of their feelings and the power of the language that they need to use. Pervasive suicidal thoughts can be really haunting for that person, and they can feel inescapable, but at the same time, really unshareable as well. And you can see what a double bind that is. So by kind of reaching out to them or reaching into the problem, you're reminding them that you care and that you want them to share what's on their mind. Most importantly, you're offering a connection and reassurance that you can and will help them as much as you possibly can. And that's sort of, offering this sense of, I'm here with you and there's hope and I'm going to be with you. Take them seriously. I probably don't need to tell you that it's really important to take them seriously. If they're having thoughts of suicide, as I've said, they may struggle to ask for help because they feel a burden, or because they're ashamed, or they might think that they don't deserve help, or simply they just might believe that nobody can help them. They may feel as though they're a burden or have never talked about these feelings before. So we should always remember that it can be hard for someone to find the words to express their feelings. Maybe think about, have you ever been in that position yourself when you've had a jumble of emotions going on? It's really hard to sort of break them down and to step out of that feeling of chaos. So your job, if we're thinking about taking the person seriously, your job is to facilitate your friend in finding the words that are meaningful to them. And this is the start of them taking charge of their feelings. I always like to think of it as finding a clearing in the woods. So you've been walking through woods which are very, very dense, and you come across every now and again a clearing. And in that clearing, you can find much more clarity in terms of your thoughts and a plan ahead. If you're concerned that a friend is having thoughts of suicide, but you don't know if they're making concrete plans, you can calmly and directly tell them about your concern. So you can ask them something like, I've noticed that you're having a really hard time, and I'm wondering if you have been thinking about suicide, or are you having thoughts of suicide or feeling suicidal? So it's as simple as that, and as open and and as caring and concerned as that. Now, one of the really important things is not to offer solutions. Solutions will come, but don't feel as though you need to find them. The very most effective thing that you can do is to connect with them through active listening. I'm going to talk about active listening skills in a minute. And give your full attention. Okay, so those skills are about listening with your complete attention. Don't be distracted by anything around you. Listen and reflect on what you're hearing with compassion and with no judgment. So you have to sort of hold yourself back a bit, and remember that you're listening with kindness. You can use non-verbal cues too, apart from the verbal ones, like saying, yes, I'm listening to you, and reflecting emotions that you're hearing. But you can also nod your head and do all those kind of non-verbal things. Of course, if you're in face-to-face with them, we can't do that at Shout, so we need to do it verbally. But if you're face-to-face with somebody, you can nod your head, just to indicate that you're following them and that you've understood. The idea of establishing a connection, and that's the most basic thing that we can do, and a hugely protective factor in suicide. You're establishing a connection, and this is absolutely key, because it's relieving the person of the sense that they're a burden. So if you remember only a couple of things, establish a connection which is warm and empathic, and relieve that person of the sense that they're a burden. Now, I always think that active listening is much harder than you think. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I'm listening. But there are a few kind of minor rules that you might want to follow. So let's think about not asking why. Try open-ended questions. So something like, can you tell me more about that? You can clarify what they're saying. So you could say, perhaps, when you say blah, am I right in thinking? So then you're clarifying, but you're also indicating that you've heard what they've said. It's really important while you're doing your listening and you've heard what your friend has to say, to offer them hope and to let them know that they're not alone. So let's move to the next step. The next step is to encourage them to get help. It can be really helpful for you to think that, some mental health struggles are sort of bigger than just you, or just you and your friend together. So it's really important that you get alongside them and you encourage them to seek help. You can look perhaps at mental health resources that are available, and you can suggest that you explore what support is available together. Again, you're connecting with them and you're suggesting that you too are going to go on that journey with them to get them the support that they need and that they deserve. Let's look at some of the options that are there for support. Of course, you can text shout to 85258 for in the moment support. GPs for longer term support and statutory support. So it's really important that that GP. I think sometimes people think that GP isn't a very good port of call, but most GPs will be able to refer somebody on or refer them to services in the community, in the local community, that could be helpful. The 111 service, there's a new 24/7 mental health option by phone, and where there's a text option, this actually could be shout, but that's always worth a try, particularly for people who want to talk to somebody. And if somebody is at imminent risk, so if they are saying that they want to take their life right now, then 999 needs to be called, so that they can have immediate support. So that's enough of me doing all the talking. I'm going to move over to our Shout volunteers. Amelia and Chris are with us. Amelia, then Chris, could you introduce yourselves, please?
Sure, I'm Amelia. I've been a Shout volunteer for just over 2 years, and I'm also a Masters of Research student researching mental health in undergraduates.
Thanks, Amelia. Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris. I've been a Shout volunteer for about 5 years now, and got involved because of mental health issues within my own family and a connection and having that conversation about what could I do differently, how could I help. So that's how I got involved.
Thank you. And just to sort of, help people to think about how they might help people um, who are having suicidal thoughts or feelings. Um, let's answer a few questions. What does changing the narrative on suicide mean to you? Chris, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean that's been really interesting over the years, and I've found that the changing narrative and the fact that we are beginning to talk about this a lot more and use words that are very difficult sometimes to talk about, like suicide, has given me the freedom to actually be a bit more open and ask a few more people about it, um, be able to reach out. So it's almost, I guess it's a bit like getting a bit of confidence that it is actually okay. So having the support of the changing narrative has helped me get involved with that.
Great, thanks, Chris. Amelia?
I think for me, it's just that suicide isn't a scary word. Yes, it's an awful, horrific thing, but talking about it, raising awareness, and asking someone about suicide, doesn't make it worse, and kind of taking away that fear around the word suicide is really important.
Yes, thank you. I mean, really hugely important. And that's what, we aim to do all the time at Shout, is to have open conversations with people. So, how would you each say you would start a conversation? What's the best way of starting a conversation with somebody who might be thinking about ending their life? Amelia, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think for me, it's about taking them in that safe space and then saying, "Hey, I wanted to check in. I've noticed that you're not quite like yourself, or you're having a really hard time." And I think that's really important. And also asking twice, "How are you?" And I think we're very often as humans to go, "Yeah, I'm great. How are you?" We're kind of taught that kind of way of speaking, but actually asking twice and allowing someone to have that space to actually open up for that second time can be really helpful.
Mm. Yes, you're right to point out that we usually say fine
Yeah.
as a response, and I've talked about kind of reaching into a conversation. It's so important, isn't it, that we show our intent in that way. Chris, I don't know if you have anything you'd
Yeah,
like.
I mean, I agree with all of that, and the word "fine" to me seems such an odd word to shut a conversation down. So yeah, asking twice, "Are you okay? Are you really okay? Um, how are things for you? What's going on in your life?" I think the other thing is that we talk about suicide and making it a not a scary word, but I think sometimes um, having the conversation in a language that works for the individual. So maybe something around um, death and dying, talking about death and dying rather than suicide might just change that. Something about using phrases like, are you thinking about ending your own life? Then the, I mean, it is trying to meet people where they are and
Mm,
create the space for them to use the language that they want. Um, I think there's a certain boldness about it, and a bravery to step into that conversation.
yeah.
Um, so personally, on a couple of occasions when I've done it, I've sort of taken a deep breath and breathed hard first, and then actually had the conversation. Um,
Mm. Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly, and I think, I don't want us to sound as though this is here's a simple thing to do, but it is something that we can do. And I always say we can do hard things. We really can do hard things, and I think just practicing the language sometimes is really helpful. But you're right to point out that every individual will have a different way of expressing themselves, and sometimes we need to be a little bit tentative with our language, and we can say, we can be tentative to start with, but we should not be afraid of saying taking your life, or thoughts about suicide, or thoughts about death and dying. Being upfront can be a huge relief. I don't know if you found that in conversations that you've had, but I think that the upfrontness of us, and the way we talk to people does relieve some of that sense that I can't use those words. I
I've
can
never,
see you
I've,
nodding.
yeah,
Go on.
I've never, sorry, jumping in. I've never had that your next question about a negative response.
Mm,
Might have had hesitation, may have had moments of people thinking, but it's amazing when you look at somebody's face, you know when they're thinking because their
mm.
eyes will do things and their face will do things. So just giving that moment of pause. But I've never had a negative response. Um, and as recently as last week, walking with a friend, um, I don't know how we got to it. I think actually I was talking about coming here and doing this thing today and what today was about. And they went very quiet. And then they said, well, actually, I yeah, probably don't talk about suicide because it's just very difficult. And sort of they were a bit dismissive. And I said, oh, what was that about? And there was a long hesitation. And then they spoke to me about a whole load of things that they're dealing with in their own life and they're with their own family. And actually, as the conversation went on, more and more came out. And as we walked together, it was a comfortable conversation after that initial sort of hesitation
Yeah,
and positive. It
yeah,
wasn't
Yeah,
negative at all.
yeah, definitely. I think it's also really important, we're talking about kind of being upfront with that conversation and saying, are you thinking about ending your life? Getting straight to that point actually can be really helpful for that individual to know that you're holding that space for them. You've said those words, and there's not kind of that unnervy feeling for them of having to kind of run around the conversation. You've gone straight up front, and they go, oh, actually, that I am, and that's the kind of space that you've held for them without them having to kind of say it themselves or start that conversation. And as you say, Chris, like I've never had anybody kind of be negative about asking. I think
mm,
sometimes people are quite scared because they might be cross, or that's quite invasive. But actually, I think it's really important people say thank you so much, thank you for hearing me, thank you for seeing me without actually having to speak. I think it's really important. You're really holding that space for them.
yeah. It's a great idea about holding space for somebody and protecting that space as well, that they can they know that they can inhabit with you, and they know that they can revisit the conversation, which is really important, because just by having one conversation doesn't make suicidal thoughts, I described them before as pervasive. It doesn't make them just go away. One thing I'd like to add about, do people ever have, a negative reaction? I must say, I talk to quite a lot of people in sort of, in public places. If I can see that somebody is looking distressed or crying, or I will always go up and talk to them. Most times, these are people who've got other things going on and they're not feeling suicidal. But I have never, ever had a negative reaction for going up to somebody and asking them, "Are you okay? Can I help you at all?" Most people are just really grateful. So please don't be afraid of rejection. Please don't be afraid of doing something wrong. It's all in your intention. And most people do actually want to open up that space that Amelia described. Let's have a look at the next question. What do you think are the best places or situations to have a conversation with someone about their mental health? What do you think?
I think it's really important to kind of have that safe space and take them away. So if we're in a social setting where there's lots of people around, take them in that quiet space, and have that conversation together, away from a crowded social space, so that they, again, going back to that safe space and holding that space for them. But yeah, taking them away, and where they feel most comfortable.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think sometimes people are in a difficult place. I mean, I have approached somebody on a tube station in London, where they were standing. It just seemed strange. They were just standing very, very close to the tunnel, and I had a conversation there. The fact that I'd asked them, they appeared quite surprised to start with, but then we just wandered over and we sat on a chair, sat on one of the seats, and it diffused that situation. So I think, yeah, wherever somebody is. But you're right, if you can get people away from the situation where they can go and sit comfortably, quietly, in a workplace, they may be concerned about peers, other people overhearing, saying things that they don't feel comfortable in front of other groups of people. So, let's have a wander down the corridor. I do think something about starting to walk. It's amazing if you get somebody walking next to you down a corridor or around the block or something like that. It just creates some comfort in the way that you're having a conversation. And I keep one word I keep coming back to is conversation. How do you make it a more comfortable conversation?
Yeah, definitely. I also think for me, when I've spoken to people as well, as you said, Chris, like getting them to walk in a conversation, sometimes when you're side by side, it's easier to talk rather than kind of straight on. So that can be really helpful. Also can be a really great distraction. And you're kind of all in your senses then looking around, kind of grounding them as well.
Yeah, in my experience working with children and young people, it can be really good to have some kind of activity going on as well, so that it takes so you're not looking at them directly. I think that can be enormously confronting for some people. So, see if you can notice something about their style of communicating, or what you know about them. You'll know if your friend doesn't like sitting having an intense conversation face to face across a table. They might want to talk to you while they're gardening, for example. And I do think, certainly with children and young people, whilst we want to be as direct as we can, face to face very often doesn't work, and doing something creative very often is quite facilitative of that.
I think there was
Thank
a
you.
comment. There was a comment
Yeah.
earlier. Somebody mentioned. I saw the word trust zip through on the chat as somebody was saying something earlier. I mean, those first couple of moments in conversation will start to create that trust. And my experience is, if you are honest and use the language and create the space for them, it's incredible, builds trust very, very quickly. And that does surprise me how quickly people will then open up and share a lot more. Um, but except
And I think
you have a
these,
couple of conversations, a couple of sentences before you get to that part.
yeah. And do you think that is about, kind of them really wanting that space to be opened
Mm.
up?
I think so. And you said earlier, you said about non-judgmentally. Um, the very fact that you've asked the question, you're listening, shows no judgment. If you've got a retort or you've got some comment you want to make, then that is going to close that trust down. Whereas actually just, thank you for telling me that. Can you explain a bit more?
Yeah.
Creates even more trust. And so that sort of ramps up.
Yeah. And what do you think about the kind of language that we use to reflect somebody's feelings? How would you sort of show them that you'd noticed how they were feeling?
I mean, my first thing is to use their words,
Mm.
because the moment I start using what I think their words mean, I've now added something of what I think's going on.
Mm.
And on the odd occasion when I've done that, which perhaps I still do in conversation, you soon get it batted back and say, no, that's not what I meant. Um, so how do I use their words, summarize those words, paraphrase those words, all of those things around active listening that shows actually I've really heard you, not sprinkled my thoughts into your world.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's also going, I'm hearing that, you're struggling with this and this. Is that correct? And they have that kind of power then to go, yes, no, actually, I meant this. And then the conversation naturally carries on.
Yeah. Yeah. So without imposing any of your ideas or your own language on it, you can just open the door, if you like, a little bit further each time. Oh, tell me about that. Am I right in thinking this? Or, so all of those things. So not closed questions, why or how, but questions which show that you're interested and you just want to help them to push that door open. You can also be explicit about that, and you can say, I really do want to hear about this and I really do want to help you find a way through. Thank you. We should I just realized we should probably move on. So when you're talking to people of different ages about mental health or suicidal thoughts, do you speak to them differently? I think, Chris, probably you've kind of covered this one. How do you respond to children who are thinking about suicide? Amelia, I don't know if you can
Yeah,
respond to that.
I think it can be very similar, and I think it's important to, as we said, kind of get to that stage, and it's very vital that we find out what's going on. But again, it's letting them use their language, and I think most importantly, especially young people want to feel heard and validated, and it's about saying, yeah, I'm hearing you. Tell me more about that, and just letting them lead the conversation. But validation is key, and allowing them to feel heard and their emotions to feel valid.
Mm. And how I think we've sort of talked about this issue as, oh, everybody can do it, and we can. I truly do believe that. But I think that people might want to hear, kind of what it can feel like for you, sort of inside.
Yeah, it can be tricky. It can be really tricky, and that's not to underestimate that. And I'm sure everybody you're here today to learn, and that's enough actually to show your intention, and you're here to learn and to allow yourself to feel whatever it is that you might be feeling throughout these conversations. And I think it's actually acknowledging yourself that you're doing a really great thing. Your intentions are right. It's okay to be like, oh, I'm not too sure what's going on here, but actually you holding that space and you seeing them and hearing them is often enough. So, take a moment to allow yourself to breathe. And also, don't be afraid of silence. I think that's also really important. Like, I'm somebody that will chat away for ages and I hate silence. And I'm like super comfortable talking to everybody and anyone, but actually allowing them to have that space, hold that silence, allow yourself time to kind of take in what's just been said. And actually, the individual may lead the conversation anyway, but be comfortable in that silence, allow yourself to breathe. And actually, you're doing a great job, even just by having that intention and being there. That's enough
Mm.
to save a life and to hold that space for somebody.
Thank you. Let's have a look at what you each do in your life to make sure that the people around you know that you're somebody who they can talk to about their mental health.
So
Um,
the conversation the other day that came about with this friend was just chatting about some of the stuff I do. So the fact that I'm a volunteer, that comes up in conversation, people know it. Um, I love having conversations with people. So I have a list of friends that I'm going to pick the phone up to anyway. So I just keep picking the phone up and we chat, and it might be a completely, apparently inconsequential conversation about something, but what it does is just shows that I'm there and I'm interested. Um, what did you do at the weekend? I am actually genuinely interested in what you did at the weekend rather than, I'm ringing you to tell you what I did at the weekend. Um, so it just bringing it into conversation. I happen to wear a t-shirt sometimes that says, "Are you okay?" on the back. It's amazing how many people stand behind me in supermarkets and start answering it. Um, I think there are just ways of having just showing a little bit of my own vulnerability as well, I think.
Mm.
Um, I do have experience through family crisis, um, and being comfortable about talking about that again just creates that first little bit of trust that actually it's okay. I'm not going to judge. I've sort of been there. Um, so yeah, conversations like that.
And important too, isn't it, to that we kind of have we're open to continuing conversations about this, about somebody's suicide ideation, so that it's, I have said it before, but it's worth repeating that we want to make sure that people know that we're around, not just now, but we're around into the future, and we're interested into the future too.
yeah.
Amelia, I don't know if you want to respond to that one.
Um, I think also just being prepared to talk about yourself, be open. I think I often, say to my friends, "Oh, I've had a really rubbish day today. This has happened, that's happened." And then you kind of open that space again for them to say, "Yeah, you know what? It's been really rubbish for me too. And I'm struggling with this and this and this." And I think, just sharing your own experiences breaks down that stigma around mental health and suicide and, saying about having a bad day and just being open.
Mm. That's really important. I was also thinking about, again, working with children and young people, and always, being very clear that if there's something that they find really hard to talk about, then, you will give it your very best shot to talk to them about it. And sometimes, just being just a simple sort of explicit um, a sentence like that can be really helpful to people, because they do remember, especially children. If you work with children and young people, you can say that when you first meet with them or contract with them, and it can be a big door opener. So finally, I would like to ask each of you how you look after your own well-being, because you have conversations with our texters about suicide and lots of other very challenging issues. So what do you do to, keep yourself steady and keep yourself as well as you can be?
I think for me, I have like quite a strict routine. I have like a skincare routine and a bath, and everyone knows that no one can talk to me during that time. That's my own space to just relax and, clear my mind. And I think also for me, like I have three things that I can do. If I had a really tricky day, I know that I can come home and have something to look forward to. So no matter how bad it is, I can get through the day with those three things. So again, it might be the bath, a cuddle with my dog, having a yummy coffee when I get home. It could be anything, but I think having things to look forward to is really helpful no matter what the day brings.
Yeah.
Great, that all sounds really good. Go on, Chris.
I saw exercise come up on somebody's chat just then, and yeah, definitely. I walk every morning. I'm lucky enough to pass some deer on the way around the walk. I have a conversation with them. They're incredibly good listeners. They never argue back, um, and probably talk to the birds. I just think being out in fresh air, open air, is a fantastic part. I am learning to breathe. I sometimes have those moments where I just catch myself and I think, gosh, all I'm doing is I'm breathing in here. rather than breathing all the way through. So I'm a big believer in just stopping and breathing. And I do switch off the phone and the news. Last year I got very intense about news and things like that, and I was reading every news site, and I was pontificating about the news, and I was telling everybody, giving my opinions about the news, and realized that actually I was just creating a whole load of anxiety for myself. So I have things I just switch off. It's not for now, and create that space for me.
You might expect me to say that, to mention connection again, because connection is one of the magic things that we can do. And of course, I have, other professionals that I can connect with, but also friends, just to talk and just to sort of offload a bit, as Amelia sort of described earlier. And apart from the connection thing, I'm a big one for physical exercise. I can see somebody in the chat said working out or something 5 times a week. Yes, that's absolutely me. You'll find me at the gym lifting weights as heavy as I possibly can, which sort of focuses my mind away from anything that's troubling me and just gives me a break. I think, sometimes having that I was going to say a weight lifted from your mind. I guess that's what it is. It can be. It's like a little break at the end of your day, which can help you to reset. Amelia and Chris, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your your wisdom and the knowledge that you have built up through your experience of being alongside our texters every day. You are so valuable to us, and you have amazing kind of skills. Thank you so much for being here today and talking to everybody. Let me just move the slide on. We don't need to see that one. There it is. So just to sort of recap and to reflect on today, it would be really good if you, after this webinar, could think about somebody in your life. Is there somebody who might need or might benefit from a conversation? Now, a conversation doesn't have to be about suicide. You can get in there really early and say, I've noticed this. How are you feeling? Practice some of those active listening skills. And I would say draw on your courage. So we can do hard things. Draw on your courage and the tips from today to reach out to somebody. And please remember that you can make the world of difference to somebody. And that's just with kindness and with compassion. Now, talking about suicide, of course, can be emotionally challenging, and it's really normal to feel anxious or overwhelmed. So it's important now to give yourself time to process your emotions, to engage in some of the self-care activities you have put in the chat and you've heard us talking about, and doing things that you really enjoy, which will help you to relax and recharge. If you need, you can reach out for support by sharing your feelings with somebody you trust. And remember that your well-being is really important, and looking after yourself allows you to continue supporting others in a healthy and in a sustainable way. Just want to leave you with starting conversations about suicide feel daunting, right? But it's a vital step in offering hope and support. We are aiming at connection. We're aiming at a non-judgmental approach with empathy and directness. And we are aiming to help people to access appropriate help and for you to get alongside them, most importantly, to connect with them and to get alongside them. I'm going to leave you with this this slide. If you are interested in becoming a Shout volunteer, you can follow this link. You can get more information from our website. And if you have any questions or concerns about the content of this webinar, you can email info@giveusashout.org. I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm looking at the time, so it's 12:52. So I think we do have time for some questions. I wonder if we can pick some up from the chat. I know there's loads in the chat. Are there any questions?
I think there was one. I did see something pass in there.
It's really hard. Go on.
Yeah, I saw something pass in there about the good old-fashioned phrase of committing suicide, and there was a bit of a discussion in chat about that. And certainly, the language we've used today, there is absolutely no judgment about it. It is we're meeting people where they are, and there is no commit about it. It is something that people are struggling with at that moment, and therefore, what is the language you will use, and how will I connect with you to have the conversation on your terms.
Yeah, I think the word commit, sort of carries with it a sense that somebody's doing something terribly wrong. And of course, they are not. They are troubled by thoughts and feelings which are overwhelming them. So thank you, whoever put that in the chat. That's great. We are trying to sort of change the conversation, and we want to have inclusive and safe language around suicide. I don't know if there's anything. I'm having trouble accessing the chat. I have to say, it keeps leaping.
Yeah, there are so many.
Somebody says it. Yeah. Somebody says it can make you feel nervous when thinking about starting a conversation. This person said they were planning suicide, and a conversation with a friend pulled them back. So that's a great example of connection being really powerful. And this person talks about being given the space to open up. And they've always followed this principle, however nervous they feel about starting a conversation. Now that's like proper bravery, and that's a great example. Thank you for sharing this. Somebody has asked, will this session be available on your website? I think it's going to be available on the website after when we've ended. So yes, if you can bear to watch us again, then we'll be there forevermore. Some tips for
Sarah. There was a question about neurodivergent, and I guess I come back to having a conversation in the language of the person you're having the conversation with is absolutely key. And there are a number of neurodivergent texters that we will talk to, and same with volunteers. So it is having the conversation in the framework and the frame of reference of that individual and use their language. If you don't understand, we ask can you help me to understand that a bit more?
That's what I was going to say. And also, ask somebody how they prefer to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Not everybody prefers to have a conversation, sort of, as we were saying before, sort of face to face, or, in a certain way. You may want to have this conversation with somebody via text. It may be in their DMs on their socials. You just need to, it's about engaging, it's about connecting. And we all need to consider the way in which the people we're trying to help want to communicate with us. Otherwise, the communication doesn't make the sense that it should, and that's what we're aiming for.
And I'm always struck by just jumping on the text thing. I'm always struck by what trust you can build by text, by what only a matter of 150, 200 characters, and backwards and forwards. I'm always amazed by the depth of trust and the depth of conversation you can have in the written word. Something comes across. Sorry, Amelia, I jumped in on you.
You're good. No, I think that's really valuable. And I think also I've just seen people asking about lots of different things, but mainly it's about kind of letting, especially young people, know that you're on their side. I'm here with you, I'm sitting with you. I'm not necessarily going to be able to fix everything, and not everybody we don't need to be fixed. It's more about just sitting with you. I'm on your side. And I think that can go a really long way. And yeah, just letting people know I'm on your side.
Oh, sorry, that it's really it's really jumping around the chat, so I really can't follow it. If you have any questions, then you can send them into the email address that I mentioned earlier on. That's on the bottom of the slides. So please do feel free to do that. I would like to thank everybody who has attended today. We hope that this has been helpful for you. Uh, if you need support, or anybody you know needs support, they can text shout to 85258. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Thank you so much for your time and attention today.